What's up guys? In today's video, I'm going to be giving you all the best settings for Apex Legends in Season 16. Originally, I wasn't even planning on making this video, but I've had a very large amount of people reach out to me asking me where the updated guide is for the season. These settings are going to boost your FPS, decrease your input lag, improve your visibility, and just overall make it a lot easier to aim and see things. I'll be going through each individual setting and talking about them a little bit and showing you guys what's the best option. After we talk about in-game settings, we'll go over the video config and Autoexec files, and then I'll also show you a cool little Nvidia control panel tweak to help improve visibility even more. So make sure you guys stick around for all of it. But now let's get into the settings. First thing we're going to cover is the gameplay tab. For interact prompt style, you want that set to compact. Having it on default will show you a large pop-up if you pass like a gun on the ground, for example, and it can definitely get in the way. For button hints, I used to recommend having these off. Now I like them on. It can make the timings for certain zipline text a little bit easier, and it doesn't take up too much room on the screen at all. Crosshair damage feedback, I have mine set to off. However, if you do want them on and you really do like the crosshair, you can set it to X. But crosshairs are kind of unnecessary in this game because you get damage numbers and sounds whenever you hit an enemy. Damage numbers, stacking is going to be the best option. Floating and both introduce unnecessary visual clutter by showing you each bullet that you hit in a long list, and it can definitely take up a large portion of your screen. Ping opacity, I have mine set to default now because with faded, it was a little bit hard to see because I have old man eyes. However, if you notice the default options getting in the way, just set it to faded. Obituaries, keep these on. This is the kill feed. You want this on at all times. Minimap rotation, keep this on. It helps you read the minimap a lot easier. Weapon auto cycle on empty, keep this off. I noticed before that when I had this setting on, I would accidentally double swap my weapons a lot of the time. So I'd be sitting there with an empty gun and I would just die. For auto sprint, if you're on mouse and keyboard, I strongly recommend keeping it off. I know a lot of controller players like to play with it on, but it's just better to have full control over your movement at all times. And there's a walk keybind that you can do, but it's still not as good as just having auto sprint off in the first place. There's also a weird delay with the guns, most noticeably in shotguns for me, because every time you move forward, you have to come out of that sprint animation, so it can make shotgun fights a little awkward, bubble fights a little bit awkward, but that doesn't happen at all with auto sprint off. Sure, you can learn to work around that, but keeping it off and having full control over the movement that you want to do will always be the best option. Double tap sprint, I have it off, but you can turn it on if you want to. Jetpack control, you want that on hold, it's the best option. Incoming damage feedback, set this on 2D. 3D and 2D, 3D both. I noticed that it introduces a little bit of distraction on the screen, and 2D is plenty good enough to be able to tell where you're getting shot from without all those little distractions. Taking damage closes death box or crafting menu, keep this off so that if you're trying to swap an armor or something, you won't get kicked out of the death box every time you get shot. Pop up, keep this off just to save a little bit of room on our screen. Unless you don't know what they do, then keep them on. Streamer mode, I have it off, but if you don't want to see the names of people in your lobby, you can turn it on. This could be good if you get nervous if you see good players in your lobby. Anonymous mode, I have mine enabled. All this does is hide your name, so if you're playing Wraith, it'll say like Wraith 1234. If you're playing Octane, it'll say Octane 1234. Usage sharing, just set this to disabled. Performance display, you always want this on so you can see your FPS and ping at all times. Club invites are disabled, but obviously if you want to join a club, make sure it's set to enabled. Communication filter by default is set to everybody, but if you don't want people in game talking to you, you can set it to nobody. Now I want to talk about reticles real quick. Right now I'm just using a yellow color. This along with the cyan blue are probably my two favorite colors. This is probably my most used one. I've talked about this reticle in a video before. White is also another really good option. Green is also really good as well. And the last one that I'd recommend is pink. Those are all my favorite reticle colors. And for laser sights, I haven't really found any good settings for these, so I just set it to whatever my reticle color is. For colorblind mode, I just use Tritanopia. It brightens up the game a little bit and makes the colors a little bit brighter. I don't really recommend any of the other two options because it washes out the colors a little bit. So I'd either recommend using Tritanopia or just keeping it off. Subtitles, I have these set to off. Subtitle size, normal, doesn't matter because we have it off. Enable accessible chat features, off. Convert incoming voice to chat text, I have that off. And play incoming text chat as speech, I have that set to off as well. So that's it for the gameplay tab. Now let's head over to the mouse and keyboard tab. Real quick, I just want to talk about mouse sensitivity. So right now I'm playing 800 DPI 1.5, which is the equivalent of 1600 DPI 0.75. It's about 34.5 centimeters per 360, and it's a really good medium sensitivity for Apex. A good sensitivity range for Apex, I would say, is about 800 DPI 1.2 through 1.8. It's a pretty valid range of sensitivities. You know, you start to go too low, it's going to be too slow, and it's going to be hard to make those micro adjustments. And if you go too high, it's going to be too fast and very hard to control, and your aim can look sloppy. And yes, there are good players who use extremely low and extremely high sensitivities, but I still feel like most people would just benefit from the range I just mentioned. So yeah, 800 DPI 1.2 through 1.8, or speaking in 1600 DPI, it would be 0.6 to 0.9. That's just a very general recommendation that I feel would work for most people. For ADS mouse sensitivity, I do like to use per optic ADS sensitivity because once you start to get past that 1x optic, I feel like the default 1.0 is just way too slow, but I do like keeping my 1x optic around like 1.0 to 1.1, somewhere in that range. And for my 2x through my 4x, I use 1.3, and for my 6x through my 10x, I use 1.4. I noticed a dramatic improvement in my aim when I up these sensitivities, so just mess around with it a little bit and see what works for you. Mouse acceleration, you want this off at all times. Mouse invert off, and lighting effects off. Now we'll talk about keybinds a little bit. For movement keybinds, there are a few you want to enable. For move forward, you want to have that on scroll wheel either up or down, and also on jump, whatever one you don't use for your move forward, use that for your jump. This will allow you to bunny hop, and having your scroll wheel toggle on move forward will allow you to tap strafe. I personally don't use crouch toggle. I just use crouch hold, and I have that on control and V. I have it on V because it's really easy for me to hit V and space at the same time so that I can do super glides. Just any key around there is good. You know, C, V, B, N. Any of those would work perfectly fine. My tactical is on E. My ultimate's on Q. Interact is on F. I used to have scroll wheel interact, but I don't use that anymore just because it made tap strafing and movement around doors a little bit awkward. Inventory is on tab. Map is on M. Primary fire is on left mouse button. My toggle fire mode is now on N because I switched my melee from my mouse button to B just because I noticed I would have a lot of accidental presses, so I just wanted to stop doing that. I use ADS hold, and that's on my right mouse button. ADS toggle can also be really good. For me personally, it made my tracking a little bit better, but it made guns like shotguns and wingman a little awkward to use. Reload on R. I don't have a cycle weapon keybind because I just like manually pressing 1 or 2. Weapon 1 is on 1, weapon 2 is on 2, holsters on 3, grenade is 4, survival items, so you know, like mobile respawn, and heat shield, that's on J. My healing wheel is on 5, but I do have separate heal keybinds that I've been trying to get used to. You know, syringe is X, medkit is G, shield cell is Z, battery is T, phoenix kit is H. I would recommend picking out some healing keybinds as this can make your gameplay much more efficient. I know we've all been there to where we're trying to select the shield battery in our healing wheel and it's just stuck on shield cell or stuck on syringe, and you have to choose the shield battery like 2 or 3 times. Having these just lets you get around that and helps you save that extra second or 2 in a fight where it could really make a difference. Character utility, so you know, that's like putting up and down your Gibby shield, that's on K, and my inspect weapon is on C, so I can flip my knife around. For communication, none of these really matter except for ping and push to talk. I have my push to talk on mouse 5 just because it's easy for me to hit in game. It doesn't really mess with my aim too much. My ping is now my scroll wheel button, and you don't really need to worry about any of these keybinds here as long as you have a primary ping keybind. And then my game chat is just on enter. But that's it for keybinds. Let's head over to the controller tab. I don't know anything about controller. I played it a couple times. I just use 4-3 and that gets the job done. There are plenty of other videos on YouTube that can go into depth a lot better than I could, but we'll just head over to your guys' favorite, the video tab. For display mode, you want this on full screen at all times. This gives you the least amount of input lag and the most FPS. For aspect ratio, right now I'm playing on 16:10. I feel like close range aiming on 16:10 is a little bit easier because of those larger hitboxes. It also gives you slightly better FPS due to there being less pixels to render, and it's also not so stretched to the point where the game starts to look ugly like it does with 4:3. However, 16:9 is always going to be the clearest, and I feel like medium to long range aiming is a lot better on 16:9. So it's kind of a trade-off between 16:9 and 16:10, and you just have to find what works best for you. 4:3 is also pretty good, but it requires a workaround and isn't officially supported by Apex, and it also stretches your game a ton, and a lot of people don't like the way that it looks. I'll be updating my stretch res video here soon. There's a new method that's a lot easier than my last video I made a couple years ago. Personally, I like 16:10 better. Like I said, I think it makes close range aiming a little bit easier, and it also makes my movement feel a lot better. You also get a little bit better FPS too, so that's always a plus. As far as good 16:10 resolutions go, 1728x1080 is by far the best. It's the same amount of stretch as 1680x1050, but it's higher quality, so it's going to look a lot better. However, you'll get a little bit better FPS on 1680x1050, and also better FPS the further down you go in resolution. However, I wouldn't go any lower than 1440x900. As far as 16:9 resolutions go, I would just recommend sticking to your native, which for most people is going to be 1920x1080, or if you're on a 1440p monitor, to be 2560x1440, so that you can get the full benefits of 16:9, just that super crisp and clear image. And for 4:3, the res that I recommend is 1440x1080. But enough about resolutions, now let's talk about brightness a little bit. I usually play anywhere from 60 to 80. I used to recommend 60, I used to recommend 80, but I definitely feel like 70 is the best option now. The more that you turn up your brightness, the more that it's going to brighten those shadows in really dark areas and help you see a lot of things you wouldn't if you had low brightness. But the higher you go, the more washed out your game is going to look, but you'll be able to see literally everything. So for your average player, I think 60 to 70 is a pretty good range. 70 is what I've been using now for a long time. For field of view, I'd recommend just playing the max 110. There are a few pro players scattered out who play things like, you know, like 104, 106, 108, but a majority of them play 110. And that's just because a higher FOV in this game is always going to be better. It makes close range aiming easier, makes your movement feel better, and you also just get more visual information. So just keep this on the max at 110. You can go even further to 120, and I'll leave my video linked down in the description below if you guys are interested in that. For FOV ability scaling, have this set to disabled so that when you do things like Octane Stim or Bloodhound ult, it doesn't change your FOV. Because if you guys didn't know, FOV and ADS sensitivity are linked in this game. So when this setting is enabled and you do one of those things like Octane Stim, it'll change your ADS sensitivity a little bit and it might throw off your aim. Sprint view shake, just have this set to minimal. Now to the advanced video settings, VSync, you want this disabled at all times. Nvidia Reflex, you want this on either enabled or enabled plus boost. If you have a good GPU, I'd recommend trying enabled plus boost, but if you guys have a medium to low end, you at least want enabled. You could try enabled plus boost, and if your game is stuttering a little bit, just knock that down to enabled, then you should be good. But you do want this on at all times. It does really help lower your input delay. Adaptive resolution target, just set this to 0, and adaptive super sampling, it'll be set to disabled. Anti-aliasing is one of these settings that you can turn on if that's something that you prefer. This will smooth out those edges and the jagged lines a little bit. However, I just feel like it makes makes the game look a little bit muddy to me. But if you do like playing with anti-aliasing on, you could turn this up and there won't really be much of a performance hit. Texture streaming budget, I'm using very low right now. And the reason is that very low is all that you need to show the textures on your hand and your gun. Anything past that, you know, like medium or high are just going to be showing more textures at a distance, which after comparing the two, I found a little bit distracting. So very low is really all that you need. But if you guys do want your game to look a little bit better and see a little bit more textures at a distance, I wouldn't go past high. I tried very high and insane, and it's very visually distracting, but very low also looks really good and it gets the job done. But you can go up pretty high and there won't be much of an FPS hit at all. Texture filtering is also pretty similar to what I just talked about. The higher you go, the more visually distracting it gets. But I found that I can use 2 or 4x and that makes the game look a lot better, but it's not too distracting. But once you go up to 8 or 16x, those textures at a distance are really going to start to pop, and I noticed it made things really hard for me to see. But you can put that on 2 or 4x and you'll be fine and your game will look a little bit better, and there won't be much of an FPS hit, or if any at all. The rest of these settings are just going to be set to lowest or disabled, as they don't help us at all. They just hurt your FPS, they hurt your visibility, and that's just not what we want. Ambient occlusion quality disabled, sun shadow coverage low, sun shadow detail low, spot shadow detail disabled, volumetric lighting disabled, dynamic spot shadows disabled, model detail low, effects detail low, impact marks disabled, and ragdolls low. So that covers all the video settings. I'll be going over more in a second when we go into the video config file. But now let's just head over into our audio tab. For master volume, I play on like 50 to 60, but I have it set to 30 just for video purposes. I'd recommend just setting it to as highest as you can without it hurting your ears, because this game does have really bad audio, so you want to hear absolutely everything that you can. For output device, just set it to whatever your computer's using. So mine's my FiO DAC. Voice chat input device, set this to whatever microphone you're using. I'm using my Wavelink, so I have that selected. Voice chat record mode, please just use push to talk. It's 2023, we don't need to be using open mic anymore. An open mic record threshold won't matter as long as we have push to talk selected. Incoming voice chat volume, I have this set to 70. I turn it down just a little bit because when it's at 100, it's too loud and they're screaming in my ear. Sound effects volume, you want to leave this on 100. Just adjust accordingly in your master volume. Dialogue volume, I used to have this a little bit higher, but since a couple of seasons ago, they added everything that the characters say in game in the kill feed. So it's kind of unnecessary to have this high, as it's just going to occlude your audio even more. So setting this down to 20 or 30 is going to be good. Music volume, you want this set to 0 so that when you're flying in, you don't have music playing and you can hear when people land around you and you can hear where they are better. Lobby music volume is personal preference. I just have it set to 0 because I don't really care. Then sound and background, this one doesn't really matter. I have it set to off. But that covers all the in-game settings. Now we're going to head over into our video config and adjust a few things over there. And it's actually super simple to get into our video config file. We're just going to go in our Windows search bar and type in saved games. We're going to click on that. We'll go to respawn, Apex, local, and it's right here, videoconfig.txt. So we're going to double click that and open it. And if you guys want to, you can copy this. So this is just going to lower the video settings even more so that you can further improve visibility and boost your FPS. So for most of these, we're going to disable them. All of these you want set to 0, but for Force and ISO, this is going to be your texture filtering. So if you have 2x, it'll say 2, or if you have 4x, it'll say 4. But if you guys ever want to change your texture filtering, it's this one right here. Map linear, you want that set to 0. Stream memory is going to be your texture. So 160,000 is going to be very low. Medium is going to be 600,000 and high is going to be 1,000,000. So if you guys ever want to change your textures in here, it's going to be this setting. For matte PIC MIP, you want this set to 4. For all of these, you just want to set these to 0. Display width, display height, just leave that alone. No window border on 0 and full screen 1. And the default res and default height is going to be your resolution. So I'm playing 1728 by 1080. So it says 1728 by 1080. However, if you're playing a different res, you know, this would be 1680 and this would be 1050, or this one would be 1440 and 1080. So if you guys want to change your resolution, this is where you come in and do that. All of these we're going to set to 0. Volumetric fog, VSync, mapback buffer count, anti-aliasing. You know, if you have that on, it'll be 1. But the most important ones that we want to make sure disabled are all of these CSM settings. CSM enabled, CSM coverage, and cascade res, you want to set these to 0. This will just get rid of all the extra shadows in game that we don't really need. Shadows aren't important in this game at all. It's not attack FPS. You're not going to see a shadow coming around a corner before you see someone else, because the game is just so fast paced. It doesn't work like that. So this will help you see in dark areas even better and also boost your FPS even more. DBS super sample enabled, set that to 0. New shadow settings, make sure it's 0. And then setting that gamma, this is going to be your brightness. So 50% brightness is going to be 1.0, 60% brightness is going to be 0.85, and 70 is going to be 0.7. It just goes backwards like that. It's weird. I don't know why. But yeah, that about covers it for the video config. Then we're just going to hit file, save. We're going to X out. Then we're going to right click it hit properties, and then read only. Now, the reason we do this is because whenever you open up Apex, it's going to try and re-enable those shadows again. We don't want that. So just keep in mind that if you guys do want to come back in here and change anything, you need to uncheck read only, change whatever you want to, come back out of it, and then recheck read only, and apply and hit OK. But now I just want to talk to you guys about the Autoexec a little bit. So it's super easy to find where our Autoexec file is located. We're just going to go to wherever we have the game downloaded, and I'll show you guys how to find that real quick. So I'm playing on the EA app, EA app, Origin, Steam. It's all the same thing. None are better than the other. They all do the same exact thing. But we'll just click Apex Legends. You want to hit manage, view properties, and then install location. You want to hit browse. It should be pretty similar with all the other launchers on how to find it. But once we're in our Apex folder, we're going to come over here to CFG, and you guys probably won't have an Autoexec file real quick. So I'll show you how to make that. You're just going to right click, hit new text document. We're going to name it Autoexec. And then where it says TXT, you want to change that to CFG, hit enter, and then it'll make the file for you. I already have one, so I got this pop up. And once we have that made, we're just going to open that up, and yours won't look like this. It'll be blank, but I'll show you how to get this. In the description below, there's a paste bin link, which will send you to my Autoexec file. So you just need to go over to that, and the page should look like this. All you have to do is click this right here that says copy, and then you right click, hit paste, and boom, there you go. That's all you have to do for that. It's done. I have gone through it all. I've sorted it out. I've deleted the duplicates and also picked out some of the more common things that people had questions about. So this right here is your FOV. You got your FPS right here. You have texture streaming enabled or disabled. You have your texture streaming budget and also your texture filtering. So just change these accordingly to whatever you want. If you do have texture filtering enabled, you want that set to 1. Or if you had a medium texture budget and it was 600,000, you just change this accordingly to 600,000. You could even fully disable texture streaming. I wouldn't recommend you doing this because it makes your game look really shitty, but if you want to, then you can. You just set this right here to 0. But that's it for the actual Autoexec file. We're just going to come up here, hit save. This one doesn't have to be read only, but there's one more thing that we need to do. We need to go back into whatever we're using for our launcher, and then in advanced launch options, you just need to paste this right here, plus exec Autoexec, and that'll make sure that every time the game is run, it'll run all those commands in the Autoexec. Now, not every single one of them work. I don't have time to go through and test each individual one. However, I do notice that my game feels a lot better with this enabled, and there is a way to enable all of those commands in the Autoexec, but I'm not going to talk about it just yet. I may do another video on that in the future if Respawn doesn't do anything about it, if it's not touched. But for now, I'm just going to leave it alone because people have been getting banned for it, and I don't want to be responsible for that. But enough talking about that. Now you just come over here and hit save, and that's it. There is one more thing that I want to show you guys, but it's only going to be for Nvidia users. So we're just going to go into our Nvidia control panel, and the setting I want to talk to you guys about is image sharpening. Now your guys' might look a little bit different. It might say image scaling, and I'll show you guys how to get the old image sharpening back. And the reason this one is so much better is because it uses a display scaling instead of GPU scaling, and it's super easy to get the old scaling back. Link down below, I have a registry file that will enable this old setting. So just click on that link, download this right here. You just double click it. It'll ask you if you want to run it. It'll say, are you sure you want to continue? You hit yes. You may need to X out of this and restart your NVIDIA control panel, but now it'll look like this. So then just come over here to your program settings, because we're only going to be enabling it for Apex. You don't want the sharpening on your desktop at all times. It's just going to look ugly. But we're going to hit the drop down menu, and we're going to find Apex Legends R5 Apex. And if you guys don't see that, it's really simple to find it. You just hit add, you look at these, and if it's still not here, you hit browse. We're going to go to wherever our Apex was installed. So for me, it's going to be my G drive. It'll be Origin Games, Apex, and it's this one right here, r5apex.exe. Just going to click that, hit open, and then it'll be in there. Then you come over here to image sharpening, and these are the settings that I like to use when I use stretched res. I like 0.6 sharpening and 0.17 for ignore film grain. But if I'm using native, I like to use something like 0.4 or 0.5, just because you don't really need all that extra sharpening because the image is already very clear. But once you have that put in, you just hit OK. Then you come down here and you'll hit apply, and then it'll be good to go. The next time you open up Apex, you'll have that sharpening enabled, and that's going to help you to see so much more. And I just know that I personally can't play without it now. But if it's too sharp for you, you can just come back in here, hit off, and then it'll turn off. That's all you have to do. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. If it did help you, remember to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any helpful videos in the future. I have a lot more Apex content planned here soon, and I'm really excited to share some of this stuff with you guys. But that's going to be it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.